Hey guys, this is Hans Hobbies, and this is another episode of my favorite RC car. So, if you guys have been following this series for a while, or just been following my channel for a while, you guys will notice something a little off, and it's that this thing isn't a Tamiya. What the heck, Han? Well, this thing looks like an off-brand piece of junk. Isn't this that Exceed RC, or HSP, that like really cheap Chinese piece of junk? And my answer would be, yeah, you're right. It's not a Tamiya. I would argue with you on the fact that it's a piece of junk, but yeah, it's technically an off-brand car. So your next question would be, why is a non-Tamiya, off-brand Redcat car one of your favorite RC cars? And my two arguments to that, my two answers to that would be quality and nostalgia. Okay, Han, you're still not making sense. You're how can the red cat be quality, and how can something like this be nostalgic? Now, my response, I already have one for you. Red Cat right now is a kind of an up and coming company. Yes, they started out selling these kind of off-brand, kind of Chinese designed cars, but these cars, all like to begin with, weren't that bad of cars. Like, yeah, they had some flops. They had some cars in there that weren't very great. But this car overall is a pretty good design, made out of pretty good, like pretty decent materials for an entry level car, and drives great, I think, and includes a lot of cool features. And it's at a really affordable price point, which is what kind of helped Redcat be able to move up the market with stuff like Gen 7, Gen 8, their new Kaiju, their Wendigo, like a lot of cool in-house designed cars they're making these days. And they're kind of starting to be a name brand. And it's really cool to see a brand like this kind of grow in my generation, because a lot of people kind of look down on Red Cat for not being an already established brand. But that's not really fair, I don't think, because not all brands start out established. Everyone has to start from somewhere. As the cliche saying goes, like Tamiya started out building wooden models, and you don't see Tamiya cars or Tamiya models still being made out of wood. That's not a thing. And Traxxas started out by retooling and kind of bringing into the hobby level market like more higher end toy or like consumer grade cars like Nikos and stuff. So that's kind of where they started out, but Traxxas isn't doing that anymore. They're making stuff like the Ultimate Desert Racer, the TRX4, really amazing cars. They're making stuff like even the Stampede and the Slash. Those are all definitely high quality, hobby grade machines. So you can't really look down on Red Cat for, I don't think, for originally being kind of an off brand, because technically, who isn't in the beginning? They're definitely trying, and this car I'll definitely defend, because I believe this is a very good quality car. I had a lot of fun with this car. It's very beginner friendly, and Red Cat's customer support and part support is also excellent. So that also helps with that experience. So I have that argument out. But what about nostalgia? So this car, for a lot of people, isn't that old. Like, isn't this like a new car, like a modern car? Like, yeah, it is a modern car, but modern doesn't always mean you can't be nostalgic for it. Because like if you think about it, when the Monster Beetle and the Lunchbox and cars like that came out, those were modern cars. And it's the same thing with this. This was a modern car when it came out. There's definitely a lot better cars than this nowadays, but um, it was a pretty nice car to have, and it still is a pretty nice car to have. A lot of people just think vintage or nostalgic cars are stuff like the Monster Beetle and the Blackfoot and the RC10s and stuff like that. But with my generation, which are also adults now, like people born in 2000 are 20 years old now. Like we are adults now. So like some of my friends are already married, they have kids, or like we're all tax paying adults just like people that were born in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. So what we grew up with were cars like this. Like a lot of people started out their hobby with cars like off-brand cars like this just because of their price point. Or a lot of people started out with cars like the Stampede or the Slash, which was new um, when I was coming into the hobby. Like those were cars that really got people amped up. Like people didn't really care as much about the Tamiyas and stuff anymore. Um, with the younger market, there just wasn't as appealing. A lot of the appeal of Tamiya cars these days is the fact that they're very nostalgic cars, but it's hard to be nostalgic if you didn't grow up with them. And what we did grow up with is cars like this. And this car is unlike the other Tamiyas I have, which kind of have a more of a projected nostalgia to it. This one is a car that I actually have like personal nostalgia to, and that's for a few reasons. One main reason is when these cars originally came out, the HSP version, the Exceed RC version, the Redcat version, they all look completely identical bodies, identical stickers. The only thing different would be maybe some of the colors and the logo stickers that are on them. But nowadays, they kind of separate themselves a little bit, so each version looks slightly different. And the Redcat version in particular, I really liked because it really reminded me of my original Stampede, but more than what I wanted from my Stampede. So this graphic design with the blue and the silver and this carbon fiber and this truck body design I also like a lot better than my Stampede too. And these Stampede like tires, but they're technically better because they're more aggressive and softer. This whole look of the truck really reminds me of my very first hobby grade RC car. And if I had known about this car, or if this car had come out exactly looking like this 10 years ago, I probably would have picked this instead of my Stampede. This is half the price of my Stampede, but has more features than the Stampede, better handling than the Stampede, more adjustable than the Stampede, and also it was everything that I wanted as a child when I was growing up playing with RC cars like New Brights and stuff. The three things I always wanted from an RC car was one, fully working suspension, check. Two, waterproof electronics, check, even 10 years ago. And the major one, it was four-wheel drive. I really wanted a car with four-wheel drive, and this offered that, where my Stampede was only two-wheel drive. So this really has all the features that I wanted in an RC car when I was a kid. So that really um, says something about this car for me. Another thing is I learned about this car from a channel on YouTube called Ultimate RC. It was hosted by a guy named Jeng. That's what he went by. That wasn't his real name, but his videos are still up, though the channel's technically kind of dead now because unfortunately he had to leave the hobby due to local restrictions and his hobby shop closing and a lot of bad stuff for his hobby, for the hobby for him. So unfortunately, he had to leave this hobby behind, and that's really unfortunate because he was a very major member of this industry and this hobby, especially online. He had like the Ultimate RC forums. He had Ultimate Tamiya. He had Ultimate Traxxas. He had a lot of, and he even had like a toy and a consumer grade RC review channel called rcmania.com. And he was a very like helpful, honest reviewer, and he had made really high quality videos. And you could really tell he enjoyed what he did and enjoyed the hobby. And because of all that, I also enjoyed watching his videos. If I was on YouTube watching a video, 98% of the time it was watching his videos, whether it was RC Mania or like Ultimate RC. I just really loved watching his videos. And one of the reviews I still go back to and watch sometimes, and one of the reviews that really still stands out to me was the review for the Exceed Rc Dynamite, because like I mentioned, this was a cheap car. I really wanted the Stampede 4x4, which had recently come out at the time, but that car was $400, and there's no way I could afford that. Whereas this car had basically everything I wanted out of a Stampede 4x4, but for a quarter of the cost, and even half the cost of my Stampede. So that was initially very appealing to me, and just the whole way he did his reviews, it was just very entertaining. And I just remember working on my cars in the summer and like on weekends, just having his videos on in the background, and being really excited in the morning whenever he uploaded something new. And that just like reminds me of my like really worry-free childhood. No worry about bills or taxes and stuff like you have to do as an adult. And it just brings me back to that happy place. And this car, every time I like see it and drive it, it really reminds me of that era of my life, and it just brings me a lot of joy. Now, I have changed some stuff, and also this platform was the first time I ever experienced a four-wheel drive RC car. Because after watching his review, I did buy the drift car version, Exceed RC Drift Star, because at that time I was kind of moving away from monster trucks and kind of going towards drift cars and rally cars, and that's where I really learned in person how great this chassis was and this whole platform was. So later on, um, when I decided to actually get the monster truck version, I knew I wasn't gonna be disappointed with it. Now this is my technically my third Volcano. Um, the original Volcano I had was a one I bought used on Amazon, which is being cheap. It wasn't even that much cheaper, but I bought it used, and I luckily got a pretty good quality one. It had a red body, and I made all the upgrades to it. I changed all the aluminum parts to blue, and um, changed some of the like upgraded some of the parts, and I had a lot of fun with it. And it was just as fun as I remembered, and as fun as I expected it to be watching those old Dynamite reviews. But unfortunately, I sold it, and I didn't even intend to sell it. I had it in my trunk of my car while I was selling a different car. And when I went to meet the guy, he didn't want to buy the car he was originally trying to buy. And he was like, "Hey, what about that one? Is that for sale?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, if you're gonna be selling it, if you're gonna sell it, what would your price be?" So I named the price. He obviously lowballed me, but because I was like desperate for money and I had just lost out on a sale, for some reason I decided to take the lowball offer. Immediately had a bad taste in my mouth, and when I got home, I immediately regretted it. So about a year later, I ended up buying this one, this blue one, and I ended up buying it used again on Amazon, which I was again being cheap. And I just should have bought a new one because it would have saved me a lot of drama. Because when I got it used, unlike my red one that I had, which was basically in like new condition, even though the sale said like new, the body was like new. It was very shiny, very nice condition, but the chassis was thrashed. Someone obviously had a lot of fun with it, jumping it off rooftops probably, and then just put the clean body on it and just returned it, got all their money back. So I wasn't very happy with that. So I submitted a ticket and they sent me another one, another used one, of course, because they weren't gonna sell me a new one after I bought a used one. So another used one got sent to me, and that one this time had a little better condition chassis, but the body was thrashed. So I don't know what happened to these, but the body was cracked down the middle. It was just absolutely trashed. What I ended up doing is just combining all the good parts from both cars and and the good body and putting into this car and then returning all the junk parts. And this is how I ended up with this one. Yeah, you could say it was kind of shady, but like they sent me junk to begin with, so you know. Um so yeah, some stuff I there's some stuff I changed, like I changed the plug into an EC3 plug. I changed the shocks into a Traxxas Stampede shocks, kind of for more of that nostalgic value, but also for performance, because these Traxxas shocks are actually not half bad. Um, I'm using Traxxas Stampede rear shocks for both sides, but then front springs for both sides. And then I changed the servo into just some high torque servo. I changed the steering horn too, because the stock servo was kind of losing power and didn't have the torque to turn these big tires with the soft suspension. So that's why I ended up changing that. But yeah, other than that, it's basically stock. Um, I've also changed the gears and stuff, but you could argue that's stock, depending on which version you're looking at. But anyway, um, let's take it outside and see how it runs. So as you saw from the video, it's still a lot of fun to drive. It's very competitive in its performance to a lot of entry-level cars, ECX stuff, Traxxas stuff, but obviously much cheaper than those, considering what it comes with and what kind of features it has. So I really enjoy this truck. I really enjoy looking at this truck drive around and enjoy um, driving this truck in general. It's just a really nice truck and definitely one of my favorites ever. If I can, I might try to find a original version Dynamite, just for nostalgic value. But this is doing the job perfectly well for now. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a like, subscribe, comment down below, all the good YouTube shenanigans. I have all these RC videos coming out all the time. So if you guys enjoy that, you can check out those other videos. You can also follow me on Instagram at Han Hobbies. And I'll see you guys in the next video.